The paper had been there for 26 years. Andre Coleman saw it the moment he turned onto Main Street, yellowed, sun-faded, pressed behind glass in a wooden frame hanging right above the door of Carter's Sweet Porch Bakery. He stopped walking. His 2 suitcases hit the sidewalk. His chest did something he hadn't expected. Written in blue crayon in the unsteady handwriting of an 8-year-old boy were the words, "I, Andre Coleman, promise to marry Brielle Carter when I grow up." Underneath 2 stick figures held hands. A smaller note had been added in the same crayon, same handwriting. "Even when she's bossy." The whole town of Maple Hollow remembered that promise. Andre had spent the last 3 days driving from Atlanta with everything he owned stuffed into a car that needed new brakes and a daughter asleep in the back seat. He had a failed marriage behind him, an empty bank account he was too ashamed to look at, and absolutely no plan. Then the bakery door opened. Brielle Carter stepped out, flour on her cheek, and looked at him the way only someone who had been waiting and given up waiting could look at a person. "A promise doesn't count," she said, "if you can't prove it." If you're new here, this channel is where we tell stories about real love, real second chances, and the kind of people who choose to stay when leaving would have been easier. Hit that subscribe button and come back for more. Now let's get into it. Andre Coleman had spent most of his adult life trying to become someone worth staying for. He grew up in Maple Hollow, a small town in Georgia where everybody knew your name and your grandmother's name and the name of the dog you had in 3rd grade. He was raised by his mother in a yellow house on Clover Street, and for the first 16 years of his life, that house was the only place in the world that felt entirely safe. When his mother died of a stroke the summer before his junior year, something in Andre went very quiet. He stopped talking about the future. He stopped making plans out loud. 3 months after the funeral, he packed what he could carry and went to Atlanta to live with his uncle, telling himself he would come back when he had something to show for it. He never came back. Not really. In Atlanta, Andre built a life the only way he knew how, steadily, carefully, without drawing too much attention to himself. He got a degree in supply chain management, found work at a mid-sized logistics company, and married Monique Harris at 28 in a ceremony that his uncle said was real nice. Monique was sharp, ambitious, and beautiful in the way that made other people in the room stand up straighter. Andre loved her genuinely at first. He believed that if he worked hard enough, kept the house clean enough, never complained loudly enough, their life together would eventually feel like the one he had promised himself he was building toward. It didn't. Monique wanted acceleration. She wanted to move to a bigger city, take risks, trade up. Andre wanted stability, a good school district, Sunday dinners, a yard where a kid could run. Neither of them was wrong exactly. They were just wrong for each other, and it took 7 years and 1 daughter to finally admit it out loud. Monique left on a Tuesday. She didn't yell. She just said very calmly that Andre was too soft for the life she wanted, and walked out with 2 suitcases and a certainty that made him feel like he'd already known the ending for years. What she left behind was Nia. Nia Coleman was 6 years old, small for her age, with tight natural curls she wore in 2 puffs on either side of her head. She had Andre's eyes and Monique's stubbornness, and a stuffed rabbit named Button that she carried everywhere under her arm at breakfast, tucked into her backpack at school, pressed against her chin when she slept. Nia was the kind of child who noticed everything and said very little, which meant she had absorbed more of her parents' unhappiness than either of them had intended. She didn't cry when Monique left. She just climbed into Andre's lap, put Button on his knee, and sat there quietly while he stared at the wall. Andre got full custody. He didn't fight for it dramatically. Monique agreed without much resistance, which hurt in its own particular way. He packed their things, put Maple Hollow into the GPS, and drove south with no plan except that he needed somewhere that already knew him. Somewhere he didn't have to explain himself from scratch. Brielle Carter had grown up 2 houses down from Andre on Clover Street. They had been inseparable from the time they were old enough to cross the yard without supervision, climbing the oak tree behind her house, fishing in the creek at the edge of town, splitting oatmeal cookies on the walk home from school. She was the one who had dared him to write the promise, the one who had handed him the crayon. She had laughed when he did it, then folded the paper carefully and kept it. When Andre left for Atlanta, Brielle waited for a letter, a call, anything. Nothing came. She waited longer than she should have, then stopped waiting and got on with her life. She went to culinary school in Savannah, came back to Maple Hollow at 24, and opened Carter's Sweet Porch in the old hardware store on Main Street. The town loved her for it. She was the kind of person a small town needed: steady, generous, capable of making something warm out of almost nothing. She had never taken down the paper. She told herself it was good for business. People got a kick out of it. But the truth, which she kept to herself, was simpler than that. It was the first time anyone had ever looked at her and said without being asked, "I choose you." Even if it had been written in crayon. Even if he never came back. He came back. The bell above the bakery door announced him before he could announce himself. Andre stepped inside with his heart doing something unsteady and his face doing its best to look calm. Carter's Sweet Porch smelled like brown sugar and vanilla, and something that took him a second to identify, it smelled like Saturday mornings when he was 10 years old, when Mrs. Carter would leave a plate of biscuits on the porch railing and tell them to take some before the birds got to them. He hadn't expected that. He hadn't expected a lot of things about this moment, including the fact that approximately 14 people in the bakery were now looking at him with the particular delight of small-town residents who had been waiting a long time for a specific piece of drama to arrive. "That's him," someone said not quietly. "The one from the sign," someone else confirmed. An older man near the window raised his coffee cup in Andre's direction. "Welcome back, son. You got some nerve showing up here." Andre smiled because there was nothing else to do with his face. He had planned what he was going to say. He had rehearsed it in the car somewhere around the Macon exit. "Brielle, I know this looks like something, but it was 26 years ago and we were children and I just want to talk." Reasonable, low-key, difficult to argue with. Then Brielle came through the kitchen door. She had flour on her left cheekbone and a dish towel tucked into the waistband of her apron. And she walked out the way people walk when they own the room they're standing in. Not loud about it, just certain. She was taller than he remembered, which was probably just adulthood doing what it did. Her hair was pulled back natural with a few loose curls around her face. She looked like someone who had figured out exactly who she was and had stopped apologizing for it. She saw him. She stopped. Then she looked him over slowly from the suitcase handle still in his hand to the exhaustion he hadn't managed to hide, and said with perfect calm, "Well, look who finally showed up. You here to keep the promise or just passing through again?" The bakery erupted. Not mean more like the sound a room makes when a long-running joke lands exactly right. Andre felt heat rise to the back of his neck. He opened his mouth, and then something small pressed against the back of his knee. Naya had been standing behind him the whole time, hidden behind his left leg, one hand gripping the hem of his jacket. She was holding Button against her chest and looking at Brielle with the careful, measuring look she gave to all new situations, assessing quiet, not yet decided. Brielle noticed her immediately. The teasing in her expression shifted into something softer, something genuine. She came around the counter, crouched down to Nia's level, and held out a star-shaped sugar cookie on a small square of wax paper. "Hi there," Brielle said. "I'm Brielle. I make cookies. Want one?" Nia looked at the cookie, looked at Brielle, looked at the cookie again. "Are you the lady my daddy promised to marry?" Nia asked. The bakery went quiet for exactly 1 second, then broke into laughter. Warm, helpless laughter. The kind that fills up a room. Andre closed his eyes briefly, but when he opened them, he caught Brielle's expression in the half-second before she smiled. Something moved through it that wasn't a joke, something that had been sitting there a long time waiting for exactly this. Not the laughter, not the audience, but the question itself. Brielle handed Nia the cookie and stood up. "Ask your daddy," she said. "He's the one who made the promise." The crowd thinned eventually. People finished their coffees, collected their pastry bags, and drifted out with the satisfied air of those who had witnessed something worth talking about at dinner. Within 20 minutes, the bakery had emptied down to a teenager wiping tables in the corner and an elderly woman near the window who appeared to have no intention of leaving and was openly watching Andre like he was a television program she had been following for years. Andre stood at the counter. Brielle stood on the other side of it. "I was going to apologize," he said. "For which part?" "The sign. I didn't know you still had it." "I didn't put it up for you." She picked up a cloth and wiped down the counter in slow, even strokes. "People like it. It's good for business." Andre looked at her. She didn't look back up. "Brielle, you want to take me to dinner," she said. "That's what you were about to say. You want to take me somewhere nice, and you're going to be charming and a little self-deprecating about the divorce, and by the end of the night I'm supposed to feel like maybe this is actually a sweet story." She set down the cloth. "I've met you, Andre. I know how you work." He didn't argue because she wasn't wrong. "So what would you have me do instead?" She was quiet for a moment. Behind him, Nia had found a small table near the window and was sitting with her cookie using a paper napkin as a canvas, drawing something in the margins with the short pencil Brielle had handed her without a word. "Sit down," Brielle said. "Right there. Drink the coffee I'm going to pour you." She set a mug on the counter. "And tell me the real reason you came back, not the version you practiced in the car, the actual one." "How do you know I practiced it in the car?" "Because you always practice things in the car. You used to rehearse your book reports on the walk to school. Same energy." Something loosened in his chest just slightly. 26 years and she still cataloged him like someone who had paid attention. He sat down. Brielle poured the coffee and leaned against the back counter with her arms crossed. Not cold, just careful. Waiting. Andre wrapped both hands around the mug. He thought about the version he had prepared, the one that was honest, but edited the one that made him sound like a man who had learned his lessons and arrived with his head clear and his intentions good. He had worked on that version for most of the drive. Then he looked at Nia. She was drawing with complete concentration, tongue pressed to the corner of her lip, knees pulled up on the chair. She had set Button on the table beside her, propped against the salt shaker facing outward, keeping watch. She did that everywhere they went, positioned the rabbit where it could see the door. Andre had never told her to do it. She had just started doing it sometime after the divorce, and he hadn't had the heart to ask why. Andre turned back to Brielle. "I came back because I ran out of places where I knew how to pretend I was fine," he said. "And Maple Hollow was the last place I remember actually being fine. So I came here. That's the real version." Brielle looked at him for a long moment. "Okay," she said finally. "Drink your coffee." It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't a beginning, but she hadn't asked him to leave, and for the first time in longer than he could remember, Andre Coleman sat somewhere and did not reach for the exit. He came back the next day, not because Brielle invited him, she hadn't, but the bakery opened at 7, and at 6:55 Andre was standing outside with Nia's hand in his and a paper bag from the gas station because it was the only place open that early and he hadn't found a grocery store yet. Brielle unlocked the door, looked at the two of them, looked at the gas station bag, and said nothing. She just stepped aside and let them in. That became the pattern for the first week. Andre showed up. Brielle let him. Neither of them named what they were doing. On the 6th day, she finally let him stay long enough after closing to have a real conversation, the kind that didn't have an audience and didn't have an exit ramp built into it. Nia was asleep on the long bench near the window, Button tucked under her chin, a half-eaten oatmeal cookie going stale on the plate beside her. "Tell me about the marriage," Brielle said. She was restocking the pastry case. She didn't look at him when she said it. Andre had been expecting the question. He still didn't enjoy it. "It wasn't Monique's fault," he said first. Brielle glanced up at that. "I spent 7 years trying to be the version of myself I thought she needed," he continued. "I thought if I kept the lights on, kept everything stable, never made her worry, that would be enough. I didn't tell her what I actually wanted. I didn't tell her when I was scared or when I felt like I was disappearing inside my own life. I just kept performing." He paused. "You can't build something real with someone when you're performing the whole time. Eventually they see through it. Or they stop looking." Brielle closed the pastry case. "Which one happened with Monique?" "She stopped looking," he said. "Can't blame her for that." Brielle was quiet. She pulled out a stool and sat across from him, and for a moment the only sound was Nia's soft breathing and the hum of the refrigeration unit behind the counter. "You want me to tell you I forgive you for leaving?" Brielle said. "Not just the marriage, leaving here. Leaving me with a crayon promise and no explanation."
"I wasn't going to ask for that tonight."
"You were going to get there eventually." He didn't deny it. "I was 18, and I didn't know how to grieve my mother and stay in the same place at the same time," he said. "So I left. And then leaving got easier every year I didn't come back until coming back felt impossible. That's not an excuse. I know what I cost you." Brielle looked at him carefully. "Do you?" Before he could answer, there was a small sound from the bench by the window. Nia had shifted in her sleep, and without waking up, she reached out and found the edge of Andre's jacket sleeve with her fingers and held on. It was the thing she did when she sensed, even unconscious, that he might be somewhere difficult. Brielle watched it happen. She looked at Andre, the exhaustion in him, the effort it was taking to stay honest instead of retreating behind something easier, and she understood something she hadn't let herself consider before. He wasn't just a man who had failed at marriage and come home to recover. He was a father who had decided that his daughter would not inherit his habit of running. He was trying to break the pattern in real time in front of everyone, with very little to show for it yet. That didn't mean she trusted him, but it meant something. "I need to know you're here because you chose this life," she said, "not because every other option fell through." "I know," Andre said. "Then keep showing up," she said, "and we'll see." The note was slipped under his door at 9:30 that night. Andre unfolded it standing in the narrow hallway of the room he was renting above Ray Tillman's garage. Nia already asleep behind him. The handwriting was Brielle's. He recognized it immediately. The same careful lettering she'd always had, like someone who had been told once that handwriting said something about a person and had taken it seriously. "Harvest Day orders due Saturday, 4 a.m. If you're serious about proving something, be at the bakery tomorrow morning. Don't be late. Don't bring excuses. Bring coffee, oat milk, 2 sugars, and something warm for Nia." Andre read it twice. He set his alarm for 3:15. He was there at 3:58. 2 coffees, 1 small carton of warm chocolate milk. Brielle opened the door before he knocked, looked at the drinks, looked at his face, and stepped back without comment. The bakery was already lit from inside the kitchen, warm, the smell of butter and yeast already moving through the air like something living. Nia was with him, drowsy and soft in her fleece jacket, button hanging from one hand. She found the long bench in the corner of the kitchen, curled up on it, pulled her jacket over herself like a blanket, and was asleep again within minutes. Brielle watched this, then took her coffee from Andre's hand and got back to work. "Wash your hands," she said. "Apron's on the hook. Don't touch anything until I tell you." "Good morning to you too." "It's 4 in the morning. Morning doesn't start until the first batch is out," she pointed. "Hands, hook, now." He obeyed. For the first hour, he mostly observed and tried not to get in the way. Brielle moved through her kitchen with a precision that made it clear this space was entirely hers. Every tool in a specific place, every timer set with purpose, every measurement done from memory because the recipe lived in her hands now. Andre had always been capable in a kitchen, but this was different. This was someone who had put 10 years into a craft, and it showed in every motion. "You're staring," she said without turning around. "I'm learning. You're about to learn how to knead dough. Come here." What followed was the most humbling 40 minutes of Andre's recent life, which was saying something given the last year he'd had. Brielle talked him through the technique twice, demonstrated it once, and then watched with barely concealed amusement as he worked the dough like he was trying to fix something broken rather than coax something to life. "You're strangling it," she said. "I'm being firm." "It's bread, Andre, not a tire." She came around behind him, reached past his arms, and adjusted his hands. Less pressure, more push. Let the heel of the palm do the work. For a moment, they were close enough that he could hear her breathe. Then she stepped back. "Again." He tried again. Better. "There," she said, and went back to her station. They worked through the dark hours that way. She directed, he followed. He made mistakes, she corrected them without cruelty. At one point, he caught the edge of a tray wrong and a row of cinnamon rolls came out darker than intended on one side, and Brielle made a sound that was almost a laugh and said those were going to be her breakfast. The tension between them, not gone, not resolved, just present, began to do something different in that kitchen. It softened at the edges, made room.
At 5:47, Nia woke up.
She sat up on the bench, blinked at the kitchen, and took in the scene with quiet adjustment. She watched her father work. She watched Brielle move. She looked around for something useful to do and found it. A large baking tray Andre had just washed sat slightly crooked on the drying rack. Nia climbed down, walked over, and straightened it carefully with both hands until the edge lined up flush with the counter. It was a small thing, a 6-year-old thing, but it was hers. Brielle reached past her, opened a small cabinet above the counter, and took out a star-shaped cookie. She set it on the corner of the tray without making a production of it. Nia picked it up. "Thank you, Miss Brielle." "You're welcome, baby." Andre had his back to them, hands in the next batch of dough, but his shoulders dropped an inch the way they did when something he had been holding finally got to put itself down. Later, when the first full trays were in the oven and the kitchen had reached that particular stillness that only exists before sunrise, Brielle leaned against the counter and looked at him directly for the first time all morning. "What do you actually want, Andre?" she said. "Not from this town, not for Nia, from me. Say it plainly." He wiped his hands on the apron, took a breath. "I want you to see who I'm trying to become," he said. "Not who I was when I left, not who I was when the marriage fell apart. I don't want your sympathy, and I don't want credit for the promise I made when I was 8. I just want a fair shot at showing you that I know how to stay." Brielle held his gaze. The oven timer went off. She pushed off the counter, pulled on her mitt, and said with her back to him, "Then stop promising. Keep showing up." She opened the oven. The smell of the first finished batch moved through the kitchen like an answer. Monique arrived on a Thursday, 12 days after Andre had texted her his new address. He had sent it as a practical matter so she could reach him about Nia's school records and the pediatrician forms that still needed forwarding. He hadn't expected her to use it as directions. But Monique had always been good at finding what she was looking for, and it turned out she hadn't just been given his address. A mutual friend from Atlanta who had family in Maple Hollow had mentioned in passing that Andre seemed to be spending a lot of time at a bakery run by a woman named Brielle, the kind of woman the friend had said that a whole town shows up for. Monique had listened to that with the particular attention she gave to things she wasn't sure how she felt about. She didn't call ahead. Andre found out she was in town from Darlene, who ran the flower shop 2 doors down. Darlene stopped him on the sidewalk and said, with the careful tone of someone delivering news they weren't sure how to categorize, "Andre, honey, there's a woman over at Carter's who says she's Nia's mother. Thought you should know." Andre got there in 4 minutes. Monique was standing near the front counter, dressed the way she always dressed, put together, precise, nothing out of place. She had a coffee she hadn't ordered from the bakery brought in from somewhere else, which Andre recognized immediately as a signal. She wasn't here as a customer. She was here as someone making a point about not needing anything from this room. Brielle was behind the counter. Her expression was neutral in the way that meant she was working hard to keep it that way. Nia was beside the pastry case, button held against her chest with both arms, her eyes moving back and forth between her mother and Brielle with the careful stillness of a child calculating how much danger a situation held. "Monique," Andre said. She turned, smiled. "I was in the area, wanted to see where you landed." She looked around the bakery slowly. "It's charming." The word landed the way she intended it to. "I'll take Nia out back," Brielle said quietly. She came around the counter and offered her hand to Nia, not making a production of it, just gently, naturally. Nia went with her without hesitation. When they were gone, Monique dropped the performance by about 30%. "She seems comfortable here," Monique said. "She is. And you? Is this what you want? A small town and a bakery and a crayon promise you're trying to cash in?" She said it without cruelty, the way someone states something they've already categorized. "Andre, I'm not here to cause problems. But you have a pattern. When things fall apart, you find somewhere soft to land, Someone steady, someone who makes you feel like enough. She paused. I was that for you once, early on. That's not what this is.
Maybe not.
But does she know that for certain? Before Andre could answer, his phone buzzed. Atlanta area code. The logistics company that had been pursuing him for 2 weeks, senior operations manager, real salary. A title that would have answered every doubt Monique had ever spoken aloud about him. He put the phone face down on the table. Monique glanced at it. She read the situation the way she always had, quickly, completely. That's a good opportunity, she said. I know. Naya deserves stability, Andre. Real stability. He picked up the phone and slid it into his pocket without answering. I'll bring Nia by later so you can spend the afternoon with her, he said. But this conversation is done. Monique picked up her coffee. She looked at him one more time, not unkindly, just with the settled assessment of someone who had already decided on the outcome, and walked toward the door. Andre stood in the empty front room and listened to the sound of Nia laughing at something in the kitchen, small and unguarded. The laugh she only made when she forgot to be careful. He stood there and let himself want this, actually want it without qualification, without the hedge he usually kept ready in case wanting things too openly made him look like a fool. Then he went to find his daughter. Monique found Brielle alone that evening. Andre had taken Nia back to Ray's garage for bath time and bed, and Brielle was closing up, wiping tables, flipping chairs, running through the end-of-day routine she had done alone for 10 years. She heard the door and looked up, expecting a late customer. Monique stepped in and stopped near the entrance, hands in her coat pockets. 5 minutes, Monique said. Woman to woman. Brielle set down her cloth. 5 minutes. Monique didn't waste them. She spoke without the sharpness she'd carried in the afternoon, and that made it worse. It made her sound credible. She said she hadn't come to Maple Hollow to cause trouble. She came because she had watched Andre for 7 years and knew his patterns the way you know the weather in a place you've lived long enough. He finds someone steady, Monique said. Someone who makes him feel grounded. And he holds on genuinely with everything he has until the thing that was actually hurting him catches up. And then he has to move again. She looked at Brielle without malice. He doesn't do it on purpose. That's almost the harder part. Why are you telling me this? Because I think you've already started to hope. Monique paused. He made me real promises too. And he meant them when he said them. He always means it. He just can't always stay. She left before the 5 minutes were up. Brielle stood in her empty bakery for a long time after the door closed. Andre came by the following evening. He knocked instead of walking in. Brielle opened the door and stepped aside. She had the paper on the counter, not the framed original from the window, but a photocopy she had made years ago and kept folded in the back of her recipe binder. She had taken it out after Monique left, smoothed it flat, and left it sitting there. I need to say something, she said. Let me finish before you respond. Andre nodded. I can't be the place you recover in, Brielle said. I can't be the soft landing while you figure out whether you actually want to stay. I've been the steady one my whole life for this town, for this bakery, for everyone who needs somewhere warm to sit. And I don't resent that. But I cannot do it for someone who might leave again once he feels better. She looked at him steadily. Monique talked to me. I'm not saying she's right about everything, but she said one thing I can't stop turning over. You came back after everything fell apart. And I don't know. I genuinely don't know whether you would have come back any other way. Andre stood very still. Take the Atlanta job if it's right for Nia, she said. Don't factor me into that. I don't want to be the reason you stay and then resent it later. She handed him the photocopy. He took it, looked at the crayon handwriting his own from a lifetime ago, and said nothing. There was nothing yet that would be worth saying. After he left, Brielle turned off the display lights and sat in her kitchen in the dark. She didn't cry. She just sat with the weight of having said the true thing, which almost never felt as clean as people expected. That night, Andre put Nia to bed in the narrow room above Ray's garage. He sat on the edge of her mattress while she arranged Button against the pillow with the rabbit's face turned toward the door. She did this carefully, the way she did most things. Then she looked up at him. Daddy, she said, if you love Miss Brielle, will she leave like Mommy did? Andre opened his mouth, closed it. Nia watched him with those steady eyes that saw more than a 6-year-old should have to see. "I don't want her to leave," she said quietly. "She always saves me a star one." Andre pulled his daughter close and held her, and Nia let him, and neither of them said anything else for a long time. He sat in the dark after she fell asleep and understood with a clarity that felt almost physical what he had been doing wrong, not just with Brielle, not just with Monique, but with himself. He had been waiting to feel ready before committing fully to anything, ready to be a good husband, ready to be a good father, ready to deserve the life he wanted. And readiness, he was beginning to understand, was not something that arrived before the decision. It arrived because of it. The Atlanta job was good. It was real money and a real title, and proof that he was capable of more than Monique had given him credit for. He could give Nia a bigger room and a better zip code, and every material thing a father was supposed to want to give his daughter. Or he could stop waiting to be ready and just stay. He didn't sleep much that night, but by morning he knew what he was going to do. Harvest Day started at 8, with bunting on every lamppost and kettle corn in the air before most people finished their first cup of coffee. Andre was up at 5:30. He made Nia's breakfast, sat at Ray's small kitchen table, and at 6:45 he picked up his phone and called the Atlanta number. The hiring manager answered on the second ring. Andre thanked him, said he appreciated the offer and the patience, and declined. He said it clearly, without drama. When he hung up, he sat with it for a moment. The weight of the closed door, the unfamiliar lightness underneath it. Then, through the open kitchen window, he heard Darlene from the flower shop on her phone, half jogging past on the sidewalk below. "Brielle's main oven is down completely out, and she's got the whole Harvest Day order." Andre was out the door before she finished the sentence. He could hear the silence of the kitchen from the back alley, a kitchen that should have been running full at this hour. Brielle opened the back door before he knocked. The look on her face lasted only a second before she reassembled it, but he caught it. Someone doing rapid calculations about how bad this actually was. "I don't need," she started. "Where's the breaker panel?" he said. She stopped, pointed. He crouched in front of the oven's service panel with his phone flashlight and worked through it the way he had taught himself to work through every household problem during the years when calling a repairman felt like admitting defeat. The issue was in the thermostat relay, a burnt connection, not a full replacement job. Fixable if he had the right parts, which he didn't, but workable if he was creative. 20 minutes later, the oven was running at reduced capacity. Not perfect, but alive. 60% output, he said, standing. "We need more ovens." He called Ray Tillman first, who had a full-size oven and lived 4 minutes away. Then Marcus Webb, who ran the barbecue supply store and had a commercial unit in his back room. Then Mrs. Patterson on Clover Street, who answered on the first ring like she'd been expecting it and said she'd be there in 10 minutes and was bringing her good pans. She arrived in 8. Within 40 minutes, Carter's sweet porch had become something between a bakery and a neighborhood effort. Ray's oven ran in the back room. Marcus's commercial unit was hauled in through the side door. Mrs. Patterson stationed herself at the prep table and directed Brielle's part-time staff with the calm authority of someone who had never once been interested in standing around watching other people work. Andre moved between stations, checking temperatures, managing timing across 4 different ovens with 4 different calibrations, running trays without being asked where to put them because he had already paid enough attention to know. He didn't announce what he was doing. He just kept the kitchen from tipping into chaos. Nia had come with him. She sat in the corner for a while, watching with wide eyes, Button in her lap. Then she climbed down, walked to the packaging table, picked up the roll of star stickers Brielle used to seal the finished boxes, and began pressing them on one per box, centered, checking each one before moving to the next. Brielle saw her from across the kitchen. She stopped for just a moment, one hand on a tray, eyes on this small girl who had decided on her own that there was something here worth helping with. Nia looked up and caught Brielle watching. She said in a voice that carried clearly through all the noise, "Daddy's not going anywhere. He's fixing everything." She said it the way children say true things without strategy, without performance, the same way she might report that it was raining outside or that Button was hungry. Just a fact. Just the truth as she understood it. Brielle turned back to her station. She pressed her hand flat against the counter for a moment, steadying herself. Then she kept working. The last order went out at 12:31. Brielle stood at the back door and watched Marcus and Ray load the final boxes into the delivery truck. After it pulled away, she stood there a little longer, just breathing. The kitchen behind her was wrecked in the way that meant something had been accomplished. Flour on every surface, stacked trays, the compressed smell of a very long morning. Andre was at the sink working through the last of the trays. His shirt had a streak of something dark across the shoulder. There was a small bandage on his right hand from where he'd caught the oven rack during the relay repair. He hadn't mentioned it. Brielle had noticed it an hour ago and said nothing. Mrs. Patterson collected her pans, kissed Brielle on the cheek, pointed at Andre and said, "Keep that one." Then she left. Ray and Marcus followed, satisfied. The bakery went quiet. Nia was back on the bench, drowsy now, button under her arm, her page of star stickers nearly used up beside her. She was fighting sleep with the determination of a child who suspected something important was still happening. Monique appeared in the doorway. She had been at the festival grounds and had clearly seen the truck go out. She looked at the kitchen, the borrowed ovens, the stacked pans, the four-way operation that had somehow held together, and she was quiet for a moment that didn't feel like strategy. "Everything get out?" she asked. 12:31, Brielle said. Monique looked at Andre. He dried his hands on a dish towel, folded it, set it on the counter. "There's still time to call Atlanta back," Monique said. "That offer was real, Andre. You'd be walking away from something significant." "I called them this morning," he said. "Before I came here. I told them no." Monique was still. "I'm not doing this to prove something to you," he said, and his voice was steady in the way that had nothing defensive in it. "I spent 7 years trying to build a life that looked right from the outside. I was miserable, and I made the people around me miserable. And I'm done performing stability for an audience that was never going to be satisfied." He looked at her directly. "Nia doesn't need a bigger apartment. She needs a father who isn't disappearing inside his own life." Monique looked at Nia asleep on the bench, button tucked against her cheek. Something moved through her expression, not guilt and not regret, but something closer to recognition. The look of someone finally seeing a thing clearly that they had been looking at wrong for a long time. She looked at her daughter, really looked, and what she saw was a child who had stopped bracing for impact, who had let herself fall asleep in a strange kitchen surrounded by people she was beginning to trust. Monique picked up her bag. "She looks settled," she said quietly. "She is," Andre said. Monique looked at Brielle, a long, honest look, the armor finally set aside, and said, "Take care of them." Then she walked out. The door closed without drama. Brielle stood in the middle of her kitchen and looked at Andre. He looked back. Neither of them spoke for a moment because the moment didn't need words yet. Then Brielle reached under the counter and brought out the original framed paper, the one from the window which she had taken down that morning before the chaos started, meaning to put it somewhere safe. She set it on the counter between them. "I'm not saying yes," she said. "I know. I'm saying keep going." Andre looked at the paper, then at her. "That's all I needed," he said. A year passed the way good years do, not quickly, not slowly, but fully. Andre found work in Maple Hollow doing what he had always been quietly good at. Fixing things, organizing things, making systems run better than they had before. He picked up contracts with 3 local businesses, and within 6 months had enough steady work that he stopped counting weeks by what was left in his account. He rented a small house on the east side of town, 2 bedrooms, a yard with an oak tree that Nia immediately assessed for climbing potential and declared acceptable. Every morning he drove her to school. Every afternoon he picked her up. On the days Brielle closed early, the 3 of them ate dinner together at the big table in the bakery kitchen. Not because anyone had formally arranged it, but because it had become gradually and without announcement the shape of their days. Nia kept a set of colored pencils in the small drawer Brielle had cleared out for her under the prep counter. Brielle always had a star cookie ready. Button had a spot on the corner shelf. Andre was not perfect. There were days when the old anxiety surfaced, the voice that told him he wasn't enough. There were evenings when he went quiet in ways that worried Brielle, and she had learned to say plainly, "Talk to me." And he had learned slowly to do it. Not to perform honesty, but to actually practice it, which was harder and took longer and mattered more. He saw a therapist in Macon every other Thursday. He didn't advertise this. He didn't hide it either. On a Saturday in October, a year and 3 weeks after he had walked back into Carter's sweet porch with 2 suitcases and a daughter hiding behind his knee, Andre drove Brielle and Nia to the old creek at the edge of town. Nia had known something was happening since the night before, when she'd gotten up for water and found her father in the kitchen at 11 p.m. with a piece of paper speaking very quietly to himself. She had stood in the hallway and listened. He went through whatever he was saying many times over. His voice broke a little on a few of them. She had gone back to bed without letting him know she'd seen, and in the morning she put on her good dress without being asked. The old wooden bridge was still there, still solid, the same one where an 8-year-old Andre had made a crayon promise to an 8-year-old Brielle on a dare. Andre stopped in the middle of the bridge. He reached into his jacket and brought out the framed original paper, carried carefully the way you carry something you have decided matters. He set it on the railing where they could all see it. Then he turned to Brielle. "I'm not going to talk about the promise," he said. "I made that when I was 8 years old and I didn't know anything about anything. What I want to talk about is the last year." He looked at her steadily. "The mornings, the dinners, the nights you told me to talk to you and I didn't want to and I did anyway. The way you learned how Nia takes her milk and that she needs 10 minutes of quiet after school before she's ready to talk about her day." His voice was even, but his hands were not entirely still. "I have never in my adult life felt like I was in the right place until this year. Not performing it, actually in it." He reached into his jacket pocket. Nia stepped forward. This was her part, the one they had practiced in the kitchen 3 nights ago, just the 2 of them. She was holding a small velvet box in both hands, with the total concentration of someone transporting something irreplaceable. She held it out to her father without dropping it, which she had identified as her primary concern. Andre took it, opened it, went down on one knee on the old wooden bridge. "Brielle Carter," he said, "I am not asking you because of a crayon promise. I am asking you because I have spent a year learning how to stay, and I want to spend the rest of my life doing it with you. Will you marry me?" Brielle looked at him, looked at Nia, who was barely containing herself. Nia whispered loudly, "He practiced a lot of times. He cried a little." Brielle laughed. The laugh broke into something that needed both hands to cover, and when she lowered them, her eyes were bright, and her answer was already visible before she said it. "Yes," she said, "on one condition." Andre smiled. "The bossy clause. Non-negotiable. Already written in." Nia made a sound somewhere between a cheer and a shriek and threw herself at both of them at once, and for a moment, the 3 of them were just tangled together on the old bridge above the creek, laughing, while the framed paper sat on the railing in the October light. The wedding was held in the garden behind Carter's sweet porch the following June. Nia wore a white dress with a yellow sash and carried her basket of flowers with the gravity of someone who understood exactly what this moment meant. She walked ahead of Brielle down the aisle with the seriousness of a person on an important assignment. Button sat on the gift table presiding. On the cake table, the framed paper held its place of honor. Below the original crayon text in Brielle's handwriting, one line had been added. Not a promise anymore, proven. Years later, Andre still woke before the sun. He made coffee. He packed Nia's lunch. He opened the back door of the house behind the bakery and let the morning in. Sometimes Brielle was already up, moving through the kitchen with the ease of someone completely at home in her own life. Sometimes she wasn't, and he stood in the early light alone for a few minutes, just present, just here, just exactly where he had chosen to be. The framed paper hung on the kitchen wall between the window and the shelf. He looked at it sometimes, not often, just occasionally, the way you look at something that marks a clear before and after in your life. The crayon had faded a little more each year. The handwriting was still unmistakably a child's, urgent, uneven, certain in the way only children can be certain about things they don't yet understand. But the line Brielle had added below it never faded. He had made sure of that. There's something this story keeps coming back to, and it's this. The bravest thing Andre did wasn't showing up with 2 suitcases and a crayon promise. It was deciding every single day after that not to leave. Real love isn't the dramatic gesture. It's the Tuesday morning when you stay. It's the hard conversation you have instead of going quiet. It's choosing someone not because you have nowhere else to go, but because this right here is where you want to be. If that landed with you, subscribe to the channel. We tell stories like this every week. Stories about people who got it wrong, figured some things out, and chose to stay anyway. You don't want to miss what's coming next.